there's reporting out of the region citing Iranian forces, citing other sources, saying that the Iranians shot down several drones. There are, the Israelis obviously could have fired missiles. And it's important to remember that Iran doesn't have as extensive an iron dome, if you will, of missile defense set up as Israel does. And just to go back to what I talked about before, I had the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. on last night, and he said that drone and missile attack that Iran launched, quote, cannot go unanswered, because if you don't answer, the Iranians will feel impunity. So we have to respond, and we will respond. And going on, he said, if we do not push back against Iran in a matter of a few years, you may see nuclear warheads on ballistic missiles. And Michael Herzog also said, in our part of the world, defense is not enough to create deterrence. We need to push back. So we knew this was coming.
Sky News digital presenter Gabriella Power explains the events that led to this dramatic escalation between Israel and Iran.
The Middle East is on a knife's edge, and the threat of World War III is closer than ever. Tensions between Israel and Iran have reached a dramatic crescendo, sending shockwaves across the globe. The world now watches with bated breath as this long-standing conflict threatens to spiral out of control. At the heart of the conflict lies the age-old struggle for power and influence. Innocent lives hang in the balance as the threat of war looms large over the region, with both sides showing no signs of backing down. Sky News Digital Originals presents Dramatic Escalation. The situation in the Middle East is dire. We're witnessing a dangerous escalation that could plunge an entire region into chaos.
I think the next thing we might see is a large-scale Israeli campaign in the north of Israel going into southern Lebanon to attack Hezbollah. And the main reason for that is that Israel is justifiably fearful of Hezbollah being able to do on a much larger scale what Hamas did down in the south in Gaza on October 7 by coming across the fence to attack Israelis. If Hezbollah attempts to do that in the north of the country, that's a large populated area. It really does present an existential threat to the future security of Israel. And I think even as we speak, Israel is taking steps to at least give themselves the ability to launch a significant military campaign into southern Lebanon. That's what I would expect to see next.
Here in Israel, we've been through a very difficult night. I mean, this has been a declaration of war by Iran. The first time it actually targeted directly from Iran into Israel after many years of calling and threatening Israel with a complete annihilation. And so right now, obviously, we'll reserve the right of a response to this, call of war. But Shari, I think there's two things. One of them, we have to think, obviously, strategically, and to make sure that the equation between Israel and Iran has not changed. Israel will continue its operation to dismantle Iranian violent influence, shipment of weapons, and soldiers and troops who are attacking every single day Israel on our borders. And so we will continue to defend our country, and we will continue to eliminate the Iranian threat that is straight on our border. If after that attack, things are changing, I can tell you that everything is on the table. But right now, we have to see how it continues to unfold.
I think it wanted to hit some Israeli targets. I think they fired more than 100 ballistic missiles. A couple of those got through. Yeah, a couple of those got through and hit an Israeli airbase, but luckily didn't do any damage. I think the Iranians are deeply embarrassed at how incompetent their strike was. They certainly calibrated this strike. As you say, they gave everyone notice. They expected that most of the missiles would be stopped. But I'm sure they thought that some more would get through than did get through. I think they needed to show their militia groups that they themselves, the Iranians, were prepared to put some skin in the game. Also, their US deterrence of them failed. Their deterrence of the US worked. So they attacked Israel, whether, with full venomous intent or not. And Biden's reaction is to tell Israel, don't respond, don't respond.
He said, Biden win, bank it.
Yeah. Biden told Iran not to attack Israel, and they attacked. So Iranian deterrence worked, American deterrence didn't work.
Very good point.
So there are some pluses and some minuses. I think Israel will strike back against Iran in due course, but they're going to let Iran stew in the technical failures that it racked up for a while. They're going to let everybody in the region look at that.
As tensions escalate, the world is holding its breath, praying for a resolution that will avert disaster. People across the Middle East and around the world are wondering what could happen next.
This was the first direct attack, and I think this is a serious warning to the rest of the world. I mean, we have intercepted 99% of the drones, UAVs, missiles, ballistic missiles that were sent to us. Can you imagine what would have happened to any other country who would have to be confronted like that? I mean, they wouldn't have the same capability as Israel, because we've been investing for years billions of dollars in defense, in making sure that our children are safe, in different technology that will make sure that our nation security is being held. And so any other country, this is a serious threat, and the results would have been absolutely devastating. And so this is not just Israel goal that Iran is going to be deterred, but the entire world.
I'm sure that's the concern all the way around the world, not just in Washington and in Jerusalem, but in Sydney and Canberra as well. But keep in mind, there's an element here that might provide an opening to not force an escalation here, which is the attack was largely ineffective. Granted, that does not excuse it by any stretch of the imagination, but reports I'm reading in the last couple of hours are that as many as 99% of the drones and the missiles were destroyed before they hit their target. So it's not as if Israel received a tremendous amount of damage. I'm not aware right now, as we have this conversation, Laura, about reports of injuries or death. So I don't want to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. But that being said, that may provide an off-ramp if the parties involved choose to look for one.
It's still very unclear, because if they ever decide to make the full strategic strike, they'll send a lot more missiles all at once, and they'll get Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Syria and Iraq to fire all at once too. But I think what you're seeing, so the Saudis and the Jordanians both actively helped Israel. So what you're seeing, the Middle East has a natural system of two alliances: the Sunni Gulf states minus Qatar, plus Israel, plus the United States, against Iran's Shiite circle of terror, which also embraces some Sunnis like Hamas. And what has stopped that from functioning well for Israel and the West is this dopey, idiotic policy that the Biden administration inherited from Barack Obama of trying to woo Iran into cooperation. So Donald Trump, and I'm not shy of criticising Donald Trump had a much more intelligent and effective policy: isolate and contain Iran and reassure the Gulf Arabs. America only has to do that. It wouldn't cost it $1 more than it's spending now, and it's got everything it wants in the Middle East.
There's an unreality in how I think both Biden in recent weeks and the Albanese government have been talking about Israel. There's this sort of fantasy world that ceasefires must happen straight away. They say there could be no future for Hamas in Gaza, but the only way Hamas is not going to have a future in Gaza is if the Israeli Defense Force defeats them in battle. Hamas is not going to give up its military capabilities, and nor is Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it's all very well for, left-centre governments to sort of talk about the importance of peace and the value of restraint, but they really need to focus on the reality of what's going on in the Middle East, and that is Israel is fighting for its life, and it will continue to do so, whether Australian governments like that or not. Israel is going to force military solutions because they have no other choice, and because Iran will keep pushing Hamas and Hezbollah to do their dirty work for them in attacking Israel.
To an extent, this is a kind of face-saving manoeuvre on the part of Iran, because, of course, this is a direct retaliation for the 1st of April attack by Israel against Iranian military commanders in Syria who were planning attacks against Israel. And they said it was on Iranian sovereign territory because it was close to their embassy. And I guess they felt they had to do something to retaliate. And I'm assuming that retaliation would not have been intended to cause a major escalation in the Middle East. And I think, they would probably calculate that Israel's going to be, as it has been up until now in Gaza, is going to be under pressure from the US to minimize its retaliation against this attack because of the overriding need by the White House to de-escalate every situation rather than let it play out in the way that it needs to play out. For example, in this case, for Israel to carry out a very significant retaliation attack against Iran, which I think is what Israel should do, and I would expect Israel will do as a result of this.
We participated over the weekend in helping defend Israel, along with the British, I believe, against the attacks from Iran. So we're actively engaged on behalf of Israel. I understand that our government in the last couple of hours has put out a statement saying they were encouraging Israel not to retaliate. And then, of course, as you've just mentioned, there's been some reporting that we've suggested we would not participate in any retaliation. That makes some sense. I would find it hard to believe that American weaponry, people would be used in attacking Iran. But so far, it looks as though we're doing exactly what one would expect. We helped Israel defend itself and now encouraging them to be cautious in their response.
Iran's attack on Israel has highlighted deep fractures across the Middle East. The region is now in one of its most dangerous situations in recent history.
I think in a way they're already united behind Israel, and this may be the most graphic demonstration of that. But Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, etc., they all want Israel to deal with Iran, whether it's directly by responding to this attack or whether it is indirectly by destroying Hamas or other Iranian proxies. But they're on the side of Israel on this because they very much fear Iran. Of course, let's not forget, Iran has carried out both direct and proxy attacks against Saudi Arabia and the UAE in the past. And it's a big concern for them. So I think, yeah, they're going to be pretty firmly, they may not come out in public and say so, but they're going to be pretty firmly on the side of Israel here. 4
Muslim nations, regional nations, Arab and North African nations, which made peace agreements and exchanged diplomatic relations with Israel under Trump. Not one of them has broken diplomatic relations as a result of the Gaza war. The Gulf Arabs really have no investment in the Palestinian cause, and they certainly have no investment in Hamas, which is part of the Muslim Brotherhood and is directed by Iran. But there will come a lot of moments of truth quite soon. I think the Israelis will strike back at Iran. That's just my guess. I don't have any intel on this. I think they'll take their time. They'll let Iran stew in the juice of its technical failure. I don't think they'll hit the nuclear facilities, but I think they'll hit military facilities with missiles. It'll be deadly. It'll be quite different from this strike. And then Iran will face the conundrum, what it does then.
Although the relationship between Jordan and Israel has gotten much better over the course of the last several years, keep in mind, Iran is not well liked amongst many in the Sunni world, in the Shia world. So that's probably not surprising. And an unprovoked attack, again, from the Iranian mainland, from the country itself. This was not a proxy attack. It was not an attack from Hezbollah or Hamas, or other Iranian funded surrogates. This came straight from Iran itself, which was the first time in history. So it's probably not surprising to see Jordan reach out to help defend Israel as well.
Former President Donald Trump has weighed in on the dramatic escalation.
Before going any further, I want to say God bless the people of Israel. They're under attack right now. That's because we show great weakness. This would not happen. The weakness that we've shown is unbelievable, and it would not have happened if we were in office. You know that. They know that. Everybody knows that. But America prays for Israel. We send our absolute support to everyone in harm's way.
And as the US election nears, it will be seen how the political impact of Middle East tensions plays out in the polls.
different. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be different than Gaza. Keep in mind, there's a very strong pro-Palestinian element here in the United States. That's different than defending Iran. Not entirely different. There are certain elements here. There's certainly anti-Israel, which of course would be against us helping Iran. But it's not exactly the same political dynamic. That being said, to the extent Joe Biden is not only the sitting president, but also a candidate for re-election, it's hard to imagine that politics isn't going to weigh in, and he doesn't want to be perceived by various folks on his extreme left as being too pro-Israel under these circumstances.
As tensions escalate between Israel and Iran, the Middle East braces for more potential upheaval. With recent confrontations, the question remains, what could be the next move in this volatile geopolitical chess game? Will diplomatic channels prevail, or are we on the brink of a larger scale confrontation?
Look, I think the Israelis are very wise, prudent. I expect a little later than you suspect Sharia after Passover, so that's after Tuesday. And I think they will act on mainland Iran. They cannot spend another $1.9 billion as they did on Saturday night doing 10 or 20 of these Iranian attacks without response. And they have to be very measured and be careful of civilians. I expect the missile factories and the drone factories will suffer some kind of fate, and that Iranian spy ship off the coast of Eritrea, off the edge of the Persian Gulf, that's directing all of those Houthi proxy attacks, that might find itself at the bottom of the ocean.
No one would be disappointed if either of those targets were hit, especially because we suspect that the missile factories, or the weapons factories in Iran, have been supplying weapons to Russia as well. Matt Canavan, we've seen that the US has called for restraint. They didn't even want Israel to strike back. But we have to remember that this isn't just a case of Iran launching those 350 attack drones and missiles on the weekend, but Iran reportedly greenlit the Hamas October 7 attacks. They fund Hezbollah, and they've been behind the Houthi rebels that have disrupted shipping. And that was all before the unprecedented direct attack on the weekend. Matt Canavan.
Well, look, I completely understand the desire for retaliation from the Israeli government. The attack that was made on them by Iran was reprehensible and does need a global response. But I am on the side of caution here. I used the example in the 1990s where Iraq bombed Israel during the first Gulf War, and the then Israeli leadership showed incredible restraint in not responding and not inflaming those tensions. And I think in hindsight, that was an extremely wise decision. I think we've got to be very careful here. I don't want the region here in the Middle East to descend into a wider war and certainly risk any greater collaboration. I mean, I think you've got to be very careful in these situations that if you're going to retaliate, if you try and do so in just a cautious way, it can just lead to a further downward spiral, because I agree with you, it would be fantastic, of course, to disarm Iran and disable their ability to attack other countries. But we also have to be realistic. Is that going to be an outcome from these attacks? If you're not going to disable and disarm them, all you possibly will do is can inflame tensions further and lead to more conflict around the world.
Michael Danby, very quickly, before we move on to the next topic, what do you think about that? Is this a serious concern that this could lead to more regional escalation?
Matt's right. If they don't do the right thing, they have to be measured, prudent, accurate. And I think you'll find that their military and technology is far more formidable than Iran's. And there are all kinds of methods that they've got to achieve the aims that I suggested. Degrading the missile and drone factories would be especially good, even if they do it by cyber warfare. Our Ukrainian friends would be very grateful for that too, as their cities are being and civilians are being murdered by these dreadful Iranian drones every night.